I didn't want to say the name or invoke anything out there. I didn't want any darkness. I felt like
Keanu Reeves must be one of the nicest, coolest people on the planet, because no one has a bad word to say about that guy ever. He might be what we should all aspire to be. We should all aspire to be.
I'm telling you, kids, don't come to Hollywood. I'm serious.
your camera's
Sickened by the standing ovation. I felt like Hollywood is just spineless, en masse.
That one statement, that one moment, a man who had eaten at every table in Hollywood, sat in every green room, cashed every check, won every crowd, looked dead into the camera and told the whole industry exactly what he thought of them. And Hollywood never forgave him for it.
I'm sick and tired of the secrets and the lies. It is the secret symbol of the Illuminati, and you're a part of it.
They laughed. They always laugh. That's what they do when someone gets too close. But then came February 2026. Jim Carrey walks onto a stage in Paris to collect a Lifetime Achievement Award. And the internet goes quiet, not with applause, with questions.
I was like, I'm dead.
Is that Jim Carrey? His nose, his jawline, his eyes, his hands? Keanu Reeves noticed too. And what he's been saying behind closed doors? It changes everything. But here's what nobody is connecting. Hollywood didn't just try to silence Jim Carrey. They tried to replace him. And the only man powerful enough and untouchable enough to call it out publicly is the one person this industry cannot cancel. Before we talk about what happened to Jim Carrey, we need to talk about who Jim Carrey actually was, because Hollywood has spent years trying to make you forget. This wasn't some fragile celebrity who stumbled into fame and got lost. Jim Carrey built himself from the ground up in a way most people in that industry couldn't comprehend, let alone survive.
I turned 16, I dropped out of school.
Because?
Well, my family had, kind of hit the skids. We were, experiencing poverty at that point. And we got a job where the whole family had to work as security guards and janitors.
Picture that for a second. 16 years old, living in a Volkswagen van, sleeping in a tent, his dad had lost his accounting job, and the whole family was doing 8-hour shifts at a tire factory just to survive. While other kids were thinking about prom, Jim Carrey was mopping floors and dreaming about making people laugh. And when he finally walked into his first comedy club, Yuck Yucks in Toronto, they didn't just reject him. They played Crucify him over the speakers to boo him off the stage. Most people are done after that. Most people go home, take the factory shift, and never look back. Jim went back. He auditioned for Saturday Night Live 3 separate times, 1980, 1982, 1986, and they said no every single time. He got a television show in 1983 called The Duck Factory. It failed. It aired out of order. Almost nobody saw it. Then The Tonight Show invited him to perform and revoked the invitation when his set didn't land perfectly. Rejection after rejection after rejection. But here's what that struggle actually built inside of Jim Carrey that Hollywood never fully accounted for. It made him impossible to intimidate. A man who survived poverty, humiliation, and a decade of industry doors slamming in his face doesn't scare easily when powerful people start making threats. He'd already lived through the worst version of the story. He had nothing left to lose. Then 1994 happened. 1 year, 3 blockbusters, Ace Ventura, The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, all massive hits, all in the same calendar year. Jim Carrey went from the guy they kept turning away to the biggest movie star on the planet, commanding $25 million a picture. And that is exactly when the machine came for him. When you become the hottest star in Hollywood overnight, you don't just get a bigger trailer and a better parking spot. You get invited into rooms. You get introduced to people, you get shown how the game actually works, and then, quietly, you get asked to play along. Jim Carrey sat in those rooms, he attended those events, he saw those faces, and somewhere between the private jets and the charity galas and the award show standing ovations, something clicked in his brain that he couldn't unclick.
What this creation is. And I ultimately found that even the me I created wasn't real, so that left me in an odd, precarious situation.
He came to Hollywood with a character, the rubber-faced, high-energy, unstoppable comedian, and the industry loved that character, needed that character, put that character on posters, and sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of tickets using that character. But the real Jim Carrey, the kid from the van, the janitor, the guy who'd seen real poverty and real struggle, that person was watching all of it from the inside, and what he saw didn't sit right. Then came Man on the Moon, Jim Carrey playing Andy Kaufman, and by every account from the production, including the Netflix documentary they made about it, Jim didn't just play Kaufman, he became him for months, in a way that genuinely disturbed the people around him.
I found myself subjugating Jim Carrey for Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton, and then
and then at the end of it looking for Jim Carrey again and having trouble finding him. And at a certain point, I realized, hey, wait a second, if it's so easy to lose Jim Carrey, who the hell?
That question didn't go away after filming Wrapped. It followed him. It changed him. Because what Jim started to realize was that the industry had always been more comfortable with the character than with the actual human being underneath it. The character could be marketed. The character could be controlled. The character would show up on cue, hit his marks, cash his check, and keep his mouth shut. The real Jim Carrey was a problem. The real Jim Carrey asked questions. The real Jim Carrey had opinions about how the machine worked, and he wasn't keeping those opinions to himself. Let's talk about the moments that didn't play well in the boardrooms and the back offices, because Jim Carrey gave Hollywood plenty of reasons to want him neutralized, and he did it completely in public, which made it so much harder for them to just quietly bury. In 2014, he walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live set for what should have been a standard celebrity promo appearance. Instead, he looked directly at Kimmel, threw up the triangle gesture, and did the entire bit about Illuminati symbols and government-hired entertainers keeping the public distracted.
Sick and tired of the secrets and the lies. It is the secret symbol of the Illuminati, and you're a part of it, and it is the all-mocking tongue. It's the symbol of the all-mocking tongue. And I'm sick of it. I want everybody to be in on the joke, man. You know what I mean? For years now, talk show hosts, people on television, people in sitcoms have been hired by the government to throw you off the track, to distract you, to make you laugh and stuff like that, make you happy and docile so you don't know what's really going on.
Now, the safe read on that moment is that Jim Carrey was doing a bit, playing a character, doing what comedians do. And that's exactly how the industry wanted you to receive it. Laugh it off, he's just being Jim. But look at the context around that appearance. This is the same man who had been quietly watching the same powerful faces cycle through every scandal and come out the other side untouched. This is a man who had already started describing Hollywood as a machine that decides who gets crowned and who gets buried. The bit had too many real edges on it for the people in those back offices to feel completely comfortable. And then, in 2017, Fashion Week in New York, a reporter catches Jim on the red carpet, and he says something that genuinely rattles people.
There is no me.
There's no you.
No.
We're not here. This is a dream.
There's just things happening. And
journalists wrote it off as Jim being eccentric again. Fans called it a breakdown. Conspiracy channels called it a coded message. But what nobody really focused on was what he said directly before that.
I don't believe in icons. I don't believe in personalities. I believe that peace lies beyond personality, beyond invention and disguise, beyond the red S that you wear on your chest that makes bullets bounce off.
Icons, personalities, disguise. A man who had spent 30 years being the industry's favorite personality was standing on a red carpet telling the world that the whole concept of the celebrity icon was a costume, a lie, a product. That is not an eccentric comedian having a weird day. That is a man who has looked behind the curtain and is trying to describe what he saw without getting himself for it. And then, March 2022, he pulls the pin entirely.
I'm being fairly serious, yeah.
Really? Why?
It depends. It depends if the angels bring some sort of, script that's, written in gold ink that says to me that it's going to be really important for people to see. I might continue down the road, but I'm taking a break.
The industry breathed a sigh of relief. The unpredictable man was stepping back. The danger was contained, or so they thought. Before we get to Paris and the clone theories and Keanu Reeves breaking his silence, we need to understand the system Jim was pushing back against, because this isn't just about one comedian. This is about how an entire industry manages dissent. Mel Gibson described it perfectly in an interview that most people glossed over.
You can't get mad. You can't let it get you, because you have to make a deal with everyone else, and it's almost unspoken that you are going to be over at some point by people who you may have done something nice for.
Read that again. This is a man who has been in the industry for decades telling you plainly, you will be betrayed, you will be stabbed in the back, and the social contract of Hollywood says you are not allowed to be angry about it. You have to smile. You have to show up to the next gala with the same people who just destroyed you and pretend nothing happened. That is the contract Jim Carrey refused to sign. And the industry has a playbook for people who refuse. We've seen it run on so many people, it barely makes the news anymore. First comes the legal pressure. In Jim's case, a wrongful death lawsuit connected to his ex-girlfriend Catriona White, built, as it turned out, on forged documents and fabricated claims, was filed against him in a way that was designed to do one thing: drag him into the mud, damage his reputation, and make him too exhausted and too scared to keep talking. The case was thrown out of court because it was fiction, but the damage was already done. The headlines had already run. The story had already attached itself to his name. That's how the machine operates. It doesn't need to win the legal battle. It just needs to make the fight expensive enough, public enough, and humiliating enough that you decide silence is cheaper than truth. Dave Chappelle described the exact same mechanism on a smaller scale when he talked about what happened on the set of a movie he was working on, the dress incident that became one of the most talked about stories in Hollywood for years.
I'm not wearing no dress, man. I'm funnier than a dress. Just give me something funny to say. I don't need to wear no dress to be funny.
And here's the part that matters. When Dave refused, they didn't argue. They didn't fight. They walked out and came back 10 minutes later with a completely different scene already written.
How did you write the scene so fast? You know, it's like, so you gotta take a stand.
That's the tell. The humiliation was preloaded. It was already sitting in a drawer somewhere waiting to be deployed. When he pushed back, they switched to plan B without blinking. That's not a creative decision. That's a conditioning mechanism. Say yes to the weird request, or watch the door quietly close on you. Jim Carrey watched that door close on him for years before he decided to stop caring whether it stayed open. So Jim retires in 2022. He's done. He's said everything he wanted to say. He's painted his paintings. He's made his peace with the emptiness of fame, and he walks away. And then 2024, he comes back, not for a big dramatic Hollywood comeback. He comes back to voice a character in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And working on that film with him in the recording booth is Keanu Reeves.
I'd met him socially in passing once, like 6-7 years ago. But then really just hanging out for the first time in London at the premiere of Sonic 3, yeah. His passion, his knowledge, allowing me to collab.
Keanu Reeves does not give effusive quotes easily. He's known for being careful, measured, genuinely low-key in a world full of people performing low-key. When he says something was intense, that means something. And according to sources close to that production, what happened in those recording sessions was more than two A-listers trading jokes between takes. Jim Carrey reportedly opened up in a way that shook Keanu to his core. He told him about the pressure that had been building for years, not just to come back and make movies, but to become a quieter, more compliant version of himself, to stop talking about the things he'd been talking about, to let the machine reclaim the mascot it had lost. Jim told Keanu things that connected directly to the Epstein files, to names and networks that went far beyond anything already in the public record, to events at parties that certain very powerful people could not afford to have described on camera by someone with Jim Carrey's reach and credibility. And then came February 2026, Paris, the César Awards. Jim Carrey walks onto the stage to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award, and the internet does not celebrate.
It's a wonderful feeling. I really took on a pretty big challenge trying to do my speech in French. So, I wrote it and I researched it and I practiced it like crazy. But, it's, then I watched everybody like talking 1,000 miles an hour up there receiving their awards. And I was like, I'm dead.
Something is wrong. People who have followed Jim Carrey for 30 years are watching that footage and saying it out loud in comment sections and on X and in group chats. That is not Jim Carrey. His nose looked different. His jawline looked different. His ears looked different. He appeared to sign autographs with his right hand, and Jim Carrey is left-handed. His eyes, which have always been distinctly brown, appeared hazel in footage from the event. And when a reporter walked up and asked him directly, point blank, the most obvious question in the world.
Sir Jim Carrey, every fake news is saying you are not Jim Carrey. That's true or not, please?
He deflected. He didn't do what the Jim Carrey any of us grew up watching would have done. He didn't spin it into a bit. He didn't turn it into a moment. He didn't give the crowd the chaotic, crackling energy that made him famous. He just moved on. Compare that to footage from October 2025, just 4 months earlier, when Jim inducted Soundgarden into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Watch that man. That's the Jim Carrey we know. The energy, the timing, the unmistakable presence of someone who was born to perform. 4 months. The gap between those two appearances is not the natural passage of time. That is not what aging looks like. That is not what retirement looks like. That looks like a substitution. This is where Keanu Reeves enters the story in a way that cannot be explained away as celebrity gossip or fan theory. Keanu Reeves is not a man who talks. He is famously, almost pathologically private. He doesn't do feuds. He doesn't do drama. He doesn't give interviews that go sideways. He rides his motorcycle, shows up on set, gives everything he has to the work, and goes home. For a man with his level of fame, his public record of controversy is essentially zero. So when word starts circulating through industry sources, through the darker corners of the trade, through people who work adjacent to the circles Keanu moves in, that Keanu Reeves has been raising serious questions about what happened to Jim Carrey, that is not background noise. That is a 5-alarm signal. Jim Carrey once said on camera,
One of the nicest, coolest people on the planet, because no one has a bad word to say about that guy, ever. He might be what we should all aspire to be.
And on camera, in the middle of Sonic 3 press, Keanu returned that energy publicly, calling Jim a creative genius and double genius for playing 2 roles. That's not polite promo talk. That is a man publicly staking his reputation, the one reputation in Hollywood that everyone agrees is clean, on another man's character, in a town that quietly distances itself from difficult people, in an industry where the social contract demands you smile and shake hands with the people who just stabbed you. Keanu Reeves publicly aligned himself with Jim Carrey, and privately, according to the rumors coming out of production circles, he went significantly further. The theory being discussed in those circles goes like this. The real Jim Carrey was getting dangerously close to a line that powerful people in this industry could not allow him to cross. He had been gathering information. He had spent 2 years in semi-retirement, but not idle retirement. He had been connecting dots that linked the Epstein network to entertainment industry figures whose names have never appeared in a single headline, despite their alleged proximity to those events. He was building a case, and he was going to Paris to collect that Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was going to use that platform to say something that could not be walked back. Except the man who showed up to collect that award in Paris wasn't Jim Carrey, according to Keanu and to multiple sources allegedly in contact with people close to him. What happened to Jim Carrey follows the same playbook the industry has run before. First came the legal pressure, the wrongful lawsuit designed to break his spirit and drain his resources. When that didn't work, when Jim kept painting and kept talking and kept refusing to disappear quietly, they escalated. NDAs, not the standard celebrity kind, the kind with teeth, the kind backed by legal resources so enormous that fighting them would consume your life, the kind that make the forged document lawsuit look like a speeding ticket by comparison. And then the replacement, a controlled version, a compliant version, the character without the conscience underneath it.
I don't want to be this character anymore. I don't want to hold up this avatar that you've created in the world. It's too much for me.
He said it himself. He didn't want to be the character anymore. And the industry's response, if the rumors are accurate, was simple. Fine. We'll find someone who will. Now, before you dismiss any of this as too extreme, too conspiratorial, too far outside the boundaries of what powerful institutions actually do to people who threaten them, let's zoom out. Cat Williams, in one of the most watched interviews in recent memory, said something that hits differently when you stack it next to Jim's story.
That happens in a business that's based off of pretend, that seems like a setup is.
Everything that happens in a business, that's based off of pretend, that seems like a setup is.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, if Jussie Smollett and Lee Daniels for a living make stories that are not real, and they make them so good that people believe them and buy them, and that's what business they're in, why would you think it would be weird if they flipped out and said a story that turned out to not be true?
That is the key to understanding what we're looking at with Jim Carrey. This is an industry that is professionally, expertly, institutionally capable of constructing false realities. That is literally the product. If the people running that machine decided they needed the appearance of Jim Carrey without the reality of Jim Carrey, they have every technical, financial, and creative resource available to make that happen. Cat Williams also said this.
Business, nothing is coincidental, or you would be hearing who's losing money. In all of these situations, it's only the artist that's losing. Somebody makes big money. When these rappers get killed, not incidental. Somebody made $100 million and now don't have to talk to that artist or none of their crew, don't have to validate none of their contracts. Now only got to deal with the mama, only got to see her once a year, and it's over. And the money goes up and up.
Think about Michael Jackson. Years of legal war with Sony over catalog ownership. Dies suddenly. Catalog value explodes overnight. Think about Prince, that literally wrote slave on his face to protest servitude contracts. Dies while the legal battle over his masters was still unresolved. Think about Whitney Houston. Her voice became an infinite product line the moment she was no longer alive to say no. None of those are proven conspiracies, but they are a pattern. And the pattern tells you that this machine knows exactly how to convert a human being into a revenue stream, alive, silent, or replaced. Jim Carrey knew that pattern. He'd been describing it in his own way for years, and the more clearly he described it, the more dangerous he became. Now let's talk about the specific names Jim was circling, because Jim Carrey's warnings never existed in a vacuum. They always arrived with context, and the context has gotten darker every year. When Jim stood on that CBS morning stage in 2022 and called Hollywood spineless, he wasn't talking about Will Smith in isolation. He was talking about an industry that gave Roman Polanski a standing ovation after he fled the country to avoid sentencing. That gave Harvey Weinstein standing ovations while every person in that room had already heard the rumors. That clapped for power while the powerless filed police reports. And at the very center of that world, the most protected, most insulated, most carefully brand-managed figure of the last 30 years, sat Oprah Winfrey, the school in South Africa, the $40 million campus that the South African government opposed from the start because of how exposed and isolated it left vulnerable girls. The dormitory employee charged with 13 counts of inappropriate contact with students aged 13 to 15, students that Oprah had personally handpicked. The follow-up scandals, the cover-ups within the school itself, the 15-year-old urging victims to stay silent, and then the Weinstein connection, decades of close friendship, warm photographs, alleged phone calls of support even after the expose. Rose McGowan publicly calling out the ugly truth that Oprah spent years carefully managing to avoid. Ice Cube, other artists who've alleged that Oprah quietly blackballs anyone who doesn't play ball with the elite club. The theory that her network initials backwards spells something. The way stories that would destroy anyone else attached to them somehow slide off her like water. This is the machine Jim Carrey refused to bow down to. Not a vague theoretical conspiracy, a specific documented set of people, parties, relationships, and protected scandals that kept cycling through the same inner circle while the rest of the world was told to look away. And Keanu Reeves? He's been quietly refusing Oprah's world for years, declining the appearances, sidestepping the events, never quite finding himself photographed in those circles. Whether that's philosophical, personal, or something more deliberate, the pattern is consistent. Two men, one loud, one quiet, both refusing the same invitation. Here's the most important thing about the Keanu Reeves and Jim Carrey connection that most people are missing. The industry cannot cancel them both at the same time. That's the protection. If Jim Carrey were just a lone comedian getting too philosophical and too loud, the machine knows exactly what to do. You give him a reputation for instability. You point to the Fashion Week interview and the Kimmel bit and the retirement speech, and you say, look at this man. He's clearly lost the plot. You stop returning his calls. You let the projects dry up. You wait. They tried exactly that playbook for years, but Keanu Reeves complicates everything. Keanu is the one figure in Hollywood that nobody, not the tabloids, not the insiders, not the PR machines, not the scandal blogs, nobody has a bad word to say about. He's given away millions of dollars of his own money to crew members on his films. He takes pay cuts so other people get paid. He doesn't have an entourage. He doesn't have an island. He doesn't have a school with police reports attached to it.
Keanu Reeves must be one of the nicest, coolest people on the planet because no one has a bad word to say about that guy, ever. He might be what we should all aspire to be.
When that man calls Jim Carrey a genius, when that man publicly stands next to Jim Carrey at a premiere, when that man starts asking questions about whether the person who showed up in Paris is really the same person he spent months talking with in a recording booth in London, that's not something the machine can easily dismiss. Because to discredit Jim, you'd have to discredit Keanu first, and they've been trying to find a way to do that for 20 years with zero results. According to the rumors, and multiple sources are pointing in the same direction here, Keanu Keanu did more than just publicly support Jim. He reportedly sent a message into the industry that Jim Carrey was not to be touched, that the attempts to freeze him out, to use legal pressure, to run the replacement playbook, that those actions had been noticed, and that they had been noted by someone who does not forget. An industry that depends on its biggest stars to maintain the illusion of a dream cannot afford to have its most beloved figure standing publicly in the corner of its most vocal critic. That's a problem they have no clean answer to. So here's where we land. Jim Carrey started as the rubber-faced kid from a Volkswagen van who just wanted to make people laugh. The industry tried to use that energy and contain it at the same time. For years, he let them. He cashed the checks, he showed up to the galas, he played the mascot, and then something cracked. Maybe it was Man on the Moon. Maybe it was the lawsuit built on forged documents. Maybe it was one too many standing ovations for people he knew deserved the opposite. Maybe it was one private party he attended and wished he hadn't. Whatever it was, Jim Carrey stopped pretending. He started warning kids to stay away from Hollywood. He started joking about Illuminati symbols on national television. He started calling the whole thing a scripted reality. He retired, he came back. He walked into a recording booth with Keanu Reeves and told him things that apparently changed the way Keanu sees this entire industry. And then he went to Paris. And the man who came back from Paris doesn't seem to be the same man who left.
When your kids don't come to Hollywood. I'm serious.
Your cameras.
The media, man, it is one hell of an entity. It really can have you thinking that the bad people are good and the good people are bad.
If that's the real Jim Carrey, then that is a warning delivered by a man who knows exactly what he's warning you about from the inside, with 30 years of receipts. And if it isn't the real Jim Carrey, then the warning already came true. And the industry that turned bad people into icons and good people into cautionary tales claimed one more name. Keanu Reeves is still out there, still quiet, still watching, still refusing to pretend. And the fact that Hollywood hasn't found a way to touch him yet, that might be the most telling detail of all.